So, you finally decided to try out some mods for Empire at War. But first, there are probably some questions that you may want answered. What version of Empire at War is best for modding? What are the best system requirements for mods? And how do I install the mods themselves? Well, have no fear, as hard mode enabled is here for you, dear viewer. In this video, we'll go into detail about the modding process for Empire at War, so that you too could hopefully join in on this amazing experience. First up, which version of the game should I get, you may ask, and that's a good question. Currently there are 3 versions of the game. The original disc versions, and I'm not ashamed of how many I have, the Steam versions, and the GOG versions. Let me keep it simple. The disc versions, while they had official updates to an extent, they're all but abandoned by the developers and modders alike. The official reason is somewhat comedic to say the least, but upon some investigation their reasons for discontinuing support will look a lot more reasonable. The first major reason not to continue official support for the disc versions was for the sake of multiplayer. As I mentioned in my complete guide for Star Wars Empire at War, the original multiplayer servers ran on GameSpy. May the Force be with their souls. Since GameSpy is gone, there was no real easy way to play multiplayer unless you used a program like Game Ranger, which ain't all that great if you want to keep the game alive. So, to solve this issue, multiplayer was integrated into Steamworks. This was great for a number of different reasons, the first being that the majority of the player base at the time was already using the Steam version anyway, and the second reason being version consistency. You see, not a whole lot of disc users knew about the official patches, partially because you had to get them from an external website. I believe it was up on LucasArts at the time, and this caused many users to have different versions of the game, giving out that annoying version mismatch message whenever attempting to connect to a lobby. Since everyone is now on Steam, this is no longer an issue, unless you modded your game, of course. What about the GOG version? Well, it's not being updated either, so you can check that off your list. But hard mode, why would I care about official support for the game if I just want to play mods? Well, my dear Padawan, let me explain. Most modifications use Forces of Corruption expansion as the basis for their mods. The thing is, for a long time that expansion had a lot of technical issues. I won't go into too much detail, but there is one critical issue that I want to mention that got handled in the Steam release. It's the infamous save bug. Well, it was not really a bug, it was more of that the developers were not accounting of how big the game will get post-release. In a nutshell, there was this issue where you saved your game, then you go back into the game and realize that your save file is corrupted. Basically, the save file had a data limit, and the better and bigger the mods got, and the longer you play the particular mod, the save file would expand beyond its technical limit. And in 2018 this was fixed, and this allowed many mods to finally be playable, and you no longer have to worry about the save file corruption anymore. Before I move on, you may have one more question. Well, I got the GOG version already laying around, or you may have the disc versions too. Can I still play some mods? And the answer is yes, to an extent. If you want to try out some mods, you'll have to try out some older ones. In order to do that, you will need to go to ModDB and start looking for mods that were released somewhere before the year 2014. You may have a chance at running them. Hey hard mode, I've got a processor that has more cores than a Super Star Destroyer's power reactor and a graphics card ready on standby to destroy an entire planet with how much power it's pulling. Oh, and about 200,000 megabytes of RAM ready with a million more on the way. Am I well equipped enough, and could I run Empire at War mods? Well, it depends.
What?
Yeah, let me explain. Here's the thing, this game was developed when multi-core processors were just a twinkle in a developer's eye. In most cases not even a twinkle at all, as most people thought that multi-core processors were just a gimmick and the future CPUs will be in strong single-core processors. None of this fancy Ryzen 12-core bantha poodoo that we have these days. In other words, the game's engine can't use more than one core for processing. If I were to recommend a processor for this game, I'd recommend Intel, but that's only because at the time of me making this video, Intel generally has better single-core performance than AMD. This does not mean that using a modern Ryzen processor from AMD won't give you a better experience. In terms of the graphics card, well, let's just say that the recommended system requirements for the base game are not gonna cut it. I've played mods on a wide variety of systems, so I'm going to make my own little minimum requirements table. For the processor, I would recommend a 5th or 6th generation Intel chip, or a 1st generation AMD Ryzen processor. For the GPU, a GeForce GTX 1660 or an NVIDIA 940MX if you're using a laptop. For RAM, I would recommend 8GB, however, the Steam version of Empire at War can only use 4GB as far as I remember. For 720p, medium to high settings for graphics intensive mods, this is pretty good. Generally, yes, having a good graphics card is great, as a lot of mods these days use a fairly high polygon count on models and utilize upgraded shading.
Hello there.
Yeah, the Steam Workshop is a good place to start. Simply finding the mod you want to play and clicking subscribe will start your download process. Launching mods is officially supported, and all you have to do is go into the main menu, select the mods you want to play, and click on the mod you want to play. However, in some cases for some reason it won't launch on your first attempt, so redoing that process 1 year time should get the job done. This usually happens every time you reboot your PC. Now yes, I know, you most likely want to jump into the hottest mods out there, like Throne's Revenge or Republic at War. However, if you just got done playing the base game and you want a mod that both has new features but is fairly straightforward, I'd recommend trying the Rise of the Mandalorians first. You may be wondering why I'm recommending Rise of the Mandalorians as your first mod to try, and the answer is quite simple. Picture it this way: you've dreamed of enlisting into the Galactic Empire because you thought that your place in life was inside of an AT-AT cockpit. However, the AT-AT is a fairly complex machine, so you decided to become a certified AT-ST driver first. Same goes with the Rise of the Mandalorians. Mechanically, this mod is nearly identical to Forces of Corruption and is fairly easy to get into. Progressing in tech level requires for you to just simply buy your way into the next tech level. The main resource stays the same, credits, and to get them you simply build mining facilities. The reason I'm mentioning this is because some mods have moved way beyond that and added other resources for you to manage. There aren't too many units to play around with, but just enough to make the experience feel fresh. This is in stark contrast with other mods that have dedicated buttons for filtering units. Of course, the bread and butter of the Mandalorians are their infantry, and there is a fair amount to play around with. And they're fairly powerful as expected. As an example, some rebel scum decided to raid my planet with their hero units, and my Mandalorian garrison murdered Chewie himself like it was nothing. Needless to say, we won that battle and Han Solo retreated when the rest of the forces were gone. In terms of graphics, the Rise of the Mandalorians ain't playing around either. This brings me to my next point, the land battles. They are fairly fun, and it's clear that a lot of work was put into them. Details went as far as adding custom turret models and construction pads, which is very appreciated as many mods ignore this aspect. It's a small detail, but small details make up the experience too. Another aspect that I find very beginner friendly is the galactic map size. Some modifications will have an insane number of planets, while here it's a reasonable amount so that it's not too overwhelming. This is the way, definitely. This is a fun one, but it's also really challenging. One thing that Awakening of the Rebellion really improved upon was the ground combat battles. And they just look spectacular, punchy, and flashy. This is in part achieved thanks to the added range the ground units have, as well as the ability for units to shoot while moving. Graphically, this mod is really high up there. Explosions and sound effects sell the experience really well, and the choice of music is spot on. It's unfortunate that I can't preview the game with its in-game music used, but the tracks added are really fitting and keep the tension up. What makes the Awakening of the Rebellion really stand out is the Galactic Conquest mode. And the main reason for that is because it has its own full-blown story mode. Just like the story modes in the base game, you will have characters to interact with, they'll give you objectives and so on. You can check out the pending assignments in your logs menu. Side quests are also kinda neat, but they have a timer on them. For example, you can be tasked with sending Darth Vader himself to Coruscant. This will temporarily make Vader unavailable to use, but once he's back, he'll bring some Inquisitors along with him. Another major aspect of gameplay in Awakening of the Rebellion is the hero system. In the base game, if your hero dies, you'll need to wait until the cooldown timer recharges. Then you can use them again. In this mod, however, hero death is permanent. Once a hero dies, you can't get them back, and luckily there's a wide range of new heroes that you can recruit. The gameplay here is quite straightforward, but it was never the selling point. The selling point are the graphics, and they are by far the best here than in any other Empire at War modification. As of the time of me making this video, ground battles don't exist in this mod yet, which is not necessarily a negative since it's great for people who want to experience galactic conquest without worrying about land combat. Yes, this game even has non-Star Wars related mods. This one focuses on the 40k universe, and I gotta say, it captures Warhammer 40k in its full capacity. Keep note, however, that this mod is half dead and only has a skirmish mode available for space combat. It does not stand out too much in terms of graphics, but its presentable and unique models and abilities sell you the 40k experience fairly well. Conclusions. I've got quite a bit to say here. In terms of non-Star Wars mods, Empire at War has ways to go. I know that there's a Halo modification also currently in development, and at least one multiverse mod well on the way. However, in terms of Star Wars content, the modding community here pretty much covered almost any period in Star Wars era imaginable. I do, however, see a big missed opportunity. If there's a place for me to present my mod wishlist, then this is it for me. You know how the base game left off with that open-ended cliffhanger that clearly needed a sequel? Well, how fun would it be to see the Empire fighting the New Republic as well as the re-emerged Sith and the Zon Consortium? I know this isn't for everyone, but it would make for an interesting what-if scenario. Either way, this wraps up the video. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, everyone.